All right, everyone. Today we've got Tyler Howells, who is the founder of Cozy Earth. This is such a fun conversation. Tyler, very genuine individual. He talks about getting Cozy Earth off the ground, all the lessons he learned, spending years overseas in China, working with manufacturers and raising capital and kind of just growing an incredible brand and product. So really fun story with Tyler. I'm excited for you guys to listen to it. And with that, let's dive in. All right, everyone, welcome in to another episode. Today we have Tyler Howells, who is the founder and CEO of home luxury brand Cozy Earth, which specializes in luxury bed linens, loungewear, sleepwear, bath linens, and more. The brand has been named one of Oprah's favorite things, which is interesting. That's cool. 5 times in 5 different product categories. Their products are favorites of celebrities, interior designers, and billionaires worldwide. The brand boasts over 2 million customers and continues to grow. And their aim is to deliver for their customers an ultimate sanctuary through life-changing luxury. So did that cover most of it?
Pretty
there?
good, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, pretty
welcome
good.
in,
Thank
Tyler.
you. Yeah,
thanks
Appreciate
for being
it.
here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I love to start by learning a little bit more about your upbringing. So any influences throughout childhood, your parents, teenage years, anyone who impacted you and kind of made you who you are today? Love to hear that.
Oh, there's plenty of people I think that helped me along the way. That's a good question. I got to reflect on it a little bit, but I would say, I'm a big product of first my environment, like where I grew up. I'm from Southern California originally.
Okay.
And, growing up, my like kind of loves were, I loved sports. I loved surfing. I loved, hanging out with my friends like everybody else, but also loved music. And so like music was a big part of me growing up. I always look back at that as like one thing that kind of helped, kind of me understand a little bit more about myself and the creative side that I might have. I used to, play guitar and perform. And it's like, and I thought for a while I was going to do that and loved hanging out at the beach, So it's like pretty laid back, unbelievable lifestyle. I've actually like spent my whole career trying to get back to it. But, it kind of, as people do, they kind of make it full circle. But, those things kind of help shape me from an environmental standpoint of just like my approach to life, and my kind of like what I value. And then I think on top of that, of course, wonderful parents, been blessed with wonderful parents and also, kind of mentors along the way as I kind of came up. Also, my grandfather's a hero of mine, mostly because of his positive, optimistic outlook and also his patience. It's something that I really admired in him. His control over his temper and the way he carried himself, I think really helped me kind of have an example that would really help me kind of formulate the kind of way I wanted to conduct myself in my life. And I think those things have helped kind of mold me, at least in the career sense and kind of perspective sense.
Yeah. Love that. And what part of Southern California was it?
South Orange County. Okay. So I was born in Mission Viejo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And grew up right around there in that area.
That's great.
So yeah, it was great place to grow up.
Yeah. I lived in Irvine and then LA for a little bit.
Oh, cool.
So there's definitely a lot that I miss about that environment, that vibe. That's great. And so tell me a little about your college experience and, growing up with the influences that you had. Did you go into school wanting to be an entrepreneur, to start a business? Had you thought about that? Like, what was your mentality?
No, I didn't think that. I thought, going into college, I felt like the best thing for me to do was just to kind of, play to my strengths. And one of my strengths, I love to read. And so, I'm not like, it's funny, I'm not like I don't read a ton of fiction. I love like nonfiction. And so I love reading about stories of people and I find them inspiring. And I love hearing like, kind of like your podcast, is kind of hearing the ins and outs of people, what made them. And so, but I also love history and like learning about that. So I majored in English at BYU. And then I was like, yeah, this is great. I think what I'll do probably is go into marketing, like a lot of people, my dad, my uncle, they were both in marketing. And I thought that would be a cool thing for me. I think I have, similar attributes. So I figured I'd go to get a master's degree in marketing at some point and then, work with a big company. I had no idea if I would be on the creative side or if I'd be on the business side or what I would do, but that was kind of a thought in my mind. And then served a mission, speaking Mandarin, Chinese in Australia. And so I learned Mandarin, and getting fluent Mandarin, that was hard to do. And I wanted to keep it going. So when I got home, I thought, what's ways I can use it still. And that's when a friend of mine, I think I probably, brought it up to me. He's like, hey, we were reading some books on just business in general. And he was like, maybe there's something here. Maybe you could help me with hardwood flooring, figuring that out. So while I was at university, I started to kind of get this budding entrepreneur side of me where it wasn't like I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't like an announcement, but it was like, hey, maybe I could set something up for myself that could, create cash flow for me and then parlay that into something else.
Yeah. And I'd read about that flooring company startup somewhere in your various bios that I kind of looked through, but tell me a little bit more about that. You spoke Mandarin. It sounded like there might have been some connection there with manufacturers in overseas tell me a little bit about that flooring, the flooring company.
Yeah, sure. The idea there was a need, right? And I think that's everything with entrepreneurship. Like, looking back, like at the time it just was happening. But as I look at it, I realized why it didn't work out, But I think there was a need for flooring at the time. It was pre 2008. So there was a massive building boom in homes. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, everyone you met at the time was in real estate of some type. Sure. It was so funny. Like every person you talk to, like, oh, I'm in real estate. Not they're posers, not like you. You're the real deal. But they would say, I do this, I do that. And it was funny, and everybody seemed to be making all this money. And so, one of my friends worked for a builder and said, hey, they need hardwood flooring for some of their townhomes that they're working in. Do you think you could get some in China? And I'd never done that before. And it sounded fun. And it's funny, that's a gene I think a lot of entrepreneurs have is they're energized by that challenge. I don't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. I've never done it before. And some people are like, where do I even start?
Right.
And for me, I just saw the need. And then I was like, okay, I feel like I could figure this out, using the internet and using Google, and what I could do. So I just started searching and looking and kind of going through, and I started reaching out to some of my friends that I'd met in Australia that were Chinese, and not great contacts there, but, kind of just bumping me along the way step by step. And then eventually I got to factories and I started to get price lists, and then I started to, scrounge up some dollars for samples. I wouldn't give them for free. So you have to buy them. And I had these boxes of wood at my house, next thing I know. And then I went out to China and started meeting with them. And then I started realizing hey, this is kind of a rat's nest. There's people saying that they're factories and they're not. Mm-hmm. They're actually just middlemen. Mm-hmm. And that's mostly what type of business is conducted. So I was like, I don't like that. So I was like, if I'm going to go sell this, I need to be super confident that I'm telling the truth, about the product. And also that it's the best that I could find. And then I realized later that was a novel concept. Most people are just looking at price, And so, and along this journey, I met all kinds of people. So I'm giving you a long answer to the story, but I met people who had done different types of importing, and they were some were pretty shady people, you'd meet I met a guy one time, who's like, hey, can you get me 1 million board feet of wood, And I was like, yeah, this is amazing. I'd love to. He's like, I've got this, and this contact. And I talked to him and I went down to meet with him. He was actually in Dana Point, California. And he rolls up in this vintage Ferrari, and he's comes out and he's just a wheeler dealer. And he's like, I asked him what he does for a living. He says, well, I just try to get products to whoever I can. Anyone who needs products, I find them. He's like, I just did 200,000 lighters, those click lighters to CVS. And I was like, okay. he says, you know, if you can find anything like that, I can do it. And I said, well, how do you know it's going to work? He goes, it doesn't matter if it works.
Jeez.
You know, he's like, it just matters if I can get it because they need it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, that's not the kind of guy I want to be. You know, that's not what I want to be known for. So that translated back when I'm in China, I'm trying to think like, I think I can do this better than everybody else, you know? And so I started using my language and kind of ingratiating myself to the people over there, and they loved it, man. They're just like, this is so cool that you care, one, to learn our language, two, you like our food and hanging out with us, and three, you're trying to make really great products, which we're passionate about too. And most people just only care about price. So that was kind of the start of me kind of cutting my teeth and learning how to do that.
And what do you think? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but you're a college student and now you're flying out to China, you're negotiating with manufacturers, you're figuring all this stuff. What do you think it was inside you that made you want to do that, as opposed to, oh, that's a cool idea, but I got to go back to class?
Yeah, I just felt like a lot of people that class wasn't moving fast enough for me. Mm-hmm. So, like I tell people this all the time, definitely go to college. It's amazing. It's so fun, you know, and it's like, you're going to learn some stuff and you're going to, you know, gain, you know, you get a ticket punched. That's important, I think, in life. And go to a good school if you can. But I felt like it was slow. So like, I felt like I could learn, I don't know, that stuff quicker. And I felt like I had more capacity to learn things, you know? And I think that's a stopping point for a lot of people. They're like, I'm doing this right now, and so I can't add something to my plate. Mm-hmm. And I have an opposite viewpoint. I feel like your plate's much bigger than you think it is. And most people are only filling up half of it. And they're like, oh, I'm so busy, I've got all this stuff going on. But in reality, like, you're always in your mind trying to, like, you know, add free time. And it's not like I don't have free time, but I think 24 hours in a day, or awake for 16 hours or whatever it is. It's my case a little more sometimes, but being awake during those hours, that you can get a lot more done. And so I just had this, like, I still do this, like, voracious appetite for information, and I love to learn. So that's what drove me, like, at the beginning. And, you know, luckily I didn't have any video game addictions, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stuff that burns a lot of hours in the day. And I grew up in a time, I think, for at least, I love the fact that I kind of grew up in a time when we didn't have all the technology. I got my first, you know, I sent my first text message in my freshman year of college, you know, so like smartphones weren't a thing. And so I grew up kind of, like I said, like, being outside, outdoors, trying to be creative in music, and then, you know, trying to better myself, learn new talents, learn new skills. So it just kind of, when I got to college, I was like, holy moly, like, now with the advent of Google and all these other things, like, I can really, like, I can learn anything, you know, I can really, and if I don't, and when I get it to a stopping point, I can maybe find people that are willing to teach me.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And that's what I'll tell my kids. And it's been a message that people have said over and over on this podcast is, when you're young, when you're in college, and you have these ideas, these ambitions, it's the lowest risk time of your life, the best time to take risks in your life, because you're paying $300 for a single single bedroom, or a bed. You're newly married or not married. There's no kids. And so like, what's your worst possible outcome there? It's okay, I'll go back to class and get a job. But if you have, that's something I wish I would have done. You know, you have ideas, you have ambitions, you have, but not always just going with going with the path that you think you need to go down, and taking the one that's less traveled.
For sure. And I would say it's not easy, because it's easy in the sense of using your time to find what you can find, but there's a lot of uphill climb. Like, at that age, no one really takes you seriously.
Sure.
And they think that you're just a young buck, you know, with a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. And even as you keep going as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of, like, passive aggressive, like, you know, from people who have, you know, careers in different, not in entrepreneurship, kind of passive aggressive energy. You might've felt it, where it's like, hey, you know, you're just some wily entrepreneur, and you're not like us who went to, you know, got our master's degree and are very measured and look at these things more objectively. And in reality, it's like, we do both. you know, and it's like, on the one hand, we have the energy and the kind of gumption to go and do things and take risks at ages where other people don't, and a little less safe track. And then the other hand, and we have to make a sale to people, you know, like a pitch to people. But on the other hand, we also are very, I think, at least in my case, very measured and very, very strategic on how I've built the career and built the company that I've got. So it's a little bit of both. But when you're a kid coming up, you have to realize, like, most people are kind of turning their nose at you a little bit.
Right.
And that's one thing you really have to have thick skin on, is like, it's not just a free green lights. Most people don't want to see you succeed in your 20s and 30s.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. So what ended up happening with the flooring company?
So 2008 happened. So the financial crisis happened, and I had, you know, I didn't know what I was expecting from that. It's funny, like, when I look back at it, I was thinking maybe I'll strike a few deals and become a millionaire. But then what, you know? And so for me, in my head, I was like, I don't know what this is going to happen, but I was more interested in learning what I just said, which was getting my stripes as an entrepreneur and like learning what it took to set one of these up, and pushing my own personal limits. Cause a lot of people think like, hey, I could never do that. You know?
Right.
I don't know anything about it. Like, how can I get started? How can I get going? And so for me, I think at the beginning, I was really just trying to cut my teeth and figure out, like, how do I do this? And do I have the aptitude and talent and energy necessary to do it? And I proved to myself in that period that I did, in spades. And so I was like, okay, I think I'm good. Like, I can really be something, and I can do a lot more than even I thought. And I surprised myself. But as I was moving through, I had, you know, I've told this story before, but I had a bunch of opportunities pop up, and I was kind of doing little things here and there with stores. And then a big national distributor of hardwood wanted to do something with us, and we had a great meeting with them. And this nice man, I can't even remember his face in my head, but I remember him being older. And he just kind of put his arm around me after the meeting and said, "Hey, I love your energy. You're awesome. Like, this is great. But I got to tell you something." He's like, "We haven't had a down quarter in I don't know how many years." And he said that we just are down 20%, and we're going to probably be down 50% next quarter. And they had just finished telling me that we had to order a ton of containers behind the one that they would order on our own dime to be able to, like, you know, so they didn't run out if it sold well. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, if they're down, right? The outlook's not so good.
Right.
So I went back with the investor who was considering investing in it. And we both kind of just decided over some Mexican food that we weren't going to pursue it right then. We're going to wait and see what happens with the economy. Well, like, within a month or two, the Dow was cratering. Financial markets were shattering. Bear Stearns went under. And so, like, all of this stuff started happening, and you're like, what does this mean for us in hardwood flooring?
Right. Not
good. It means that this with subprime mortgage crisis, people were not going to build houses. In fact, they were going to turn in their keys, and housing was going to go down 30, 50%, you know, in pricing. So, there was no building, there was nothing going on. And so it made sense to move on. So for me, I literally stored it in my closet thinking maybe I could pull the trigger on it later. But it didn't. It was like, that recession was like 8 years, you know. It wasn't 8 years of recession, but the effects of it were almost 8 years. Yeah. So, I moved on to something else.
Yeah. And you mentioned an investor. For you guys, I mean, you had to buy material, order samples you talked about. Was that just bootstrapping with you and your buddy, or did you go out and say, hey, we need to bring in someone who's got some capital, we make an order for this flooring?
Yeah. No, I just bootstrapped the sampling of the ordering. And then I set the business up in a way where we would have them give us a down payment to start the order, which would cover most or all the cost of the order. Okay. And then the margin was on the final payment of the product. So it didn't require bootstrapping.
Yeah, got it.
I don't know about today if that could still be done, but at the time I had it set up in a way that it could be. Yeah. So I didn't need capital up front. Now, in that deal with that national distributor, that was going to require some capital for the other subsequent
Got it. Yeah.
containers, not too much, maybe 300K.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a lot, but that would leverage us into, into seven figures for an order. So it's pretty great, as a kid. And I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to hit it big here. And then I was like, no, I better hold back. And honestly, I don't remember feeling really sad about it. It's like, I felt like I dodged a bullet.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I'm sure in the rule book, definition, it's a failure, but in my mind, I was like, it's a success in a sense, because I learned all this information for free.
Right.
Well, for time. Mm-hmm. And then I had also proven something to myself and avoided a huge disaster.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds like you made the right move there. I also read about a beauty company that you, what's the story there?
I worked with a beauty company just for a minute. I was just helping them at trade shows. Okay. And then I would do some stuff in the back of house and warehouse stuff. Like, I wasn't above any job. I'm still not above any job, but I kind of was just like, yeah, let's, I'll help and be around entrepreneurs. And so they were entrepreneurs, and I got to learn a little bit of how they approach things. Got to travel. I traveled with them to China and worked on some stuff with them. But yeah, it was just a good experience for me to kind of get in there and do that. And it was all over the place. They were involved in all kinds of different other avenues as well. So I kind of got to see what I did want to do and not want to do. And, did kind of scratch another itch for me in terms of like, working on some stuff. And incidentally, one of those companies, kind of led me to the auto shop. So
Did you do an auto shop?
Yeah. Did you know about that?
I must have missed that. Tell me about that.
No. So randomly, and this is where I'm at, kind of how I approach this whole thing is like, I just am agnostic to what I do in terms of like what sector it's in. As long as I feel like I'm doing good in the world and I feel like I can add some serious value, then I'll do it. If it, the stars align. So, I was working with this beauty company, just helping them on some things, very low level job, and then, they were talking about, they had a car dealership randomly, like how a lot of these guys in Utah have a dealership's license, It wasn't a real dealership, but it was like that kind of a thing. And they were trying to convert cars to run on natural gas. So in 2008-9, there's a lot of people out of work. A lot of people were trying to save money, and gas was super high. And so CNG, compressed natural gas for cars, made a huge push. And the governor here, Governor Huntsman at the time, was trying to make I-15 the natural gas corridor, because we have so much of it in Utah. There was a huge boom in natural gas out in Vernal, where they mine for it, and so or drill for it. And so I was like, okay, this is a good place to be. It seemed like, and fuel for cars, it's oil. Like, oil industry could be good. And the question was, could we get a kit that would convert cars to run on natural gas? And so I was like, it's a fun challenge, So I worked on that for a year, went to China, met with all these different auto parts makers, talked to people in Italy and Argentina about cylinders and kits and componentry, built a kit, and we got this kit that could convert any car to run on natural gas biofuel within like 4 hours.
Wow.
So like even trucks, so like it was basically like you push a button and your car would transition over to natural gas, and you lose very little horsepower, and it was a great thing. And the greatest thing about it was gas at that time for a car was like 60 cents a gallon for natural gas in a car. I think it could have been less, but to fill up a car was like $9 or $10, and you could drive it for 200 miles. Wow. And if you ran out, you could just push the button again, one button, and it would switch back to gas.
Gas, yeah.
And the cool thing about it is it's like totally eco-friendly. Like it's 0% emissions. So like carbon, people who are worried about carbon, it totally burns off. So it's better for the environment. And seems like a no-brainer, right?
Right.
And we have more natural gas in the United States than Saudi Arabia has oil. So we're good to go.
Yeah.
And not so much. So when I was in China, I was looking to secure these cylinders. I wasn't looking to convert cars. I was just looking to sell the componentry. And I thought we had a heater, So I was in Beijing, and I was with this massive cylinder operation that makes these cylinders that go in the back of the cars. And they're like, the one of the top people at the Department of Transportation were there, and he kind of was interested in me speaking Mandarin. We started talking, we went to dinner. He was like, tell me about your idea. And I told him, and he goes, it's a multi-billion-dollar idea. He says, it's never going to happen. And I was like, what? Why? And he's like, 3 letters. He's like, the EPA. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, the EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, blah, blah, blah. He goes, no, they protect the oil companies and their politicians that are on their board. The politicians protect them and that oversight committee. And I was like, this is a world I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean? You know, and he's like, mark my words. He says, natural gas is too fast. They can't switch over to it. Like the United States. So there's this guy named T. Boone Pickens who ran BP Capital, BP, the oil company.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
They were making huge investments in oil and gas, and specifically natural gas at the time. And he was pushing this thing called Pickens Plan in front of Congress to get us to switch over to natural gas. And his argument was, if we could switch over all commercial vehicles within 3 years, like, cause you know how easy I was explaining.
Right.
And we would reduce our dependence on foreign oil by 50%.
Wow.
Which would bankrupt Iran and all these countries that rely on it, right? Russia and other companies. And I guess that's not a good idea, because what he was explaining to me was, you know, ExxonMobil at the time was like the largest employer of Americans at the time. And oil companies can't move quickly and agile like that. And if they were to, so they know that that's better for the environment. They know that the infrastructure for cars is already there. They know that we have more natural gas. They know that it helps with foreign, you know, problems that we'd have over there. And still they won't do it. He says they're favoring electricity right now for cars, electric cars, because it takes 15 to 20 years to really get going.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? Tesla.
Yeah.
So what they did is they gave you $5 to $10,000 per Tesla that they sold, still do almost, and subsidized that industry because it gave them more time to pivot, to switch what they need to do and diversify their investments. He says, mark my words, if this takes off big, he said, they'll just start fining people arbitrarily because they haven't looked at it, even though there's no laws against it, and they'll be put out of business. And 2 months later, the 2 biggest conversion companies in Utah got fined $1 million, I think, a piece, and they went out of business overnight. One of the guys that spawned out of that was a guy from Nikola. Do you know that guy down there? They went to jail recently, or I think he's going to go to jail or something.
Okay.
His name's Trevor Milton, I think is his name. He started Nikola.
Okay.
During COVID, his company shot up like Tesla and he became a multi-billionaire. He was doing hydrogen fuel cell. And I do this because he was working in CNG, moved on to hydrogen fuel cell for cars, but it turned out to be he didn't really have the technology for it, and he had been faking it.
I have heard of this now. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So there were a lot of people in the industry at the time. I wasn't a criminal, but he was definitely, you know, he jumped onto this and then moved on another thing and then made some mistakes, I guess. But, you know, a lot of people were excited about that at the time, but the whole industry, excuse me, ended up kind of folding overnight.
Yeah.
And it's still something that hangs out there.
All political.
They also levied a tax on natural gas for vehicles. So the one that you get out of your grill or whatever, your stovetop, that's cheap. But if you put it in your car, they charge you.
That's so crazy that
more.
There's like a viable solution to a lot of the problems we have with oil, and it's just getting completely vetoed because it's political.
And it's not a conspiracy. It's like an open conspiracy. It's an open secret against, you know, certain things. And I get it. Like, you know, the country has to do what they have to do.
Right.
You don't, also in a recession, they don't want to make it worse.
Sure. Yeah.
So it makes sense, but they do pick winners and losers. And that's when I realized I don't want to have anything to do with the government.
Yeah. Got it. So about what time was that? What year?
That was 2000, probably eight or 9.
Okay. So
it was probably 8.
Okay. So at what point do you then start transitioning into Cozy Earth and thinking through that idea? What was the timeline there?
So, you know, after that, I briefly started an auto shop because one of the guys I was with he needed to get out of personal debt, and he was like a really talented tech, and he's like, how do I do it? And I said, you need to start a shop. That's the only way. And he says, will you help me start it? And I said, I got nothing going on. I'm unemployed.
Yeah.
So let's try. And I knew nothing about cars. We started the shop, and it's now got 10 bays, and it's it's still around. It's like 18 years old, I think.
Really?
Yeah. It's called Viking Automotive. It's up in Murray.
Cool.
Great place and great guy, Eric, who I worked with. And during that time, I helped him spin it up and just kind of get it going. And then he did all, the work. And then at that time I was still looking at other options, and a friend came by, a family member of my wife's asked me, an uncle, an aunt, were like, hey, we found this stuff in China, this silk comforter on one of our trips. They take a lot of seniors on trips over in China, and they'll like walk them through factory after factory. And it's not real factories. It's really just gift shops that look like a factory. And then they have these junky kind of silk comforters at the end that they give you, but it feels good, but the quality's not that good. And so I felt it, and they said that we don't get hot underneath it at night. It's like amazing. And we wanted to try it. And I tried it, and they said, do you think there's a business here? And I loved it. I was like, I didn't get hot underneath it the whole night. And we slept under a window at the time, and it was just burning hot in the morning in July.
Yeah.
And we were both perfect temperature. My wife too was pregnant at the time, and she was having hot flashes, and she was like, I feel amazing under this thing. So I thought there's something here, like that people could need this. And I've always hated down comforters. They look good, but they're way too hot.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
And so I was like, this is kind of making sense. And so I said, well, you can't just sell a comforter, and, you need to make it better. And so I went out to China and started working on that, and I got really passionate. And it's like funny because it tapped into something that I had when I was a kid, which was, I always loved soft things. Like I was always a really tactile kid. And I've told this story before. When I was 11, I asked my mom for my birthday for just soft sheets. I wanted the softest sheets we could find. And I was so disappointed that they all felt the same. I thought, if this is my birthday present, I can really turn it up, Yeah. And I felt all these different products. It's funny. You still, even today, like you feel different products. They're all just same, like same.
Sure.
So I wanted to make something different. And I started getting in with these factories and just getting super obsessed with textiles and building my expertise on it. And then as I got going, I was like, I found some pretty amazing stuff made from bamboo, but it was not good quality. And so I was like, we got to make it great quality. And then the Chinese people are like, don't do that, because Americans only like cheap stuff. They're like, they only care about price. Like they throw it away after a week or two, and then they buy another one. Like their impression of us is, everyone always says like China makes cheap stuff. Like, it's not true. It's like China makes what Americans buy.
Yeah.
They buy cheap stuff. And so I told him, I think that's not true. I think that Americans like quality. And I think if we made something that would really differentiate ourselves, it was better than everyone else. And that started my kind of journey into Cozy Earth. So I built a bedding set that I was obsessed with myself. I brought it to family and friends and like, what is this? Like jaw dropping good. And I was like, I think I have something. And then I just said, let's do it. Let's go for it. And so I started the company, and then that uncle an aunt was kind enough to put up a little seed capital, a little bit, and get me going and fill my basement up with a bunch of bedding. And then I was off to the races.
There you go. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what year was that?
That was, it was 2010 was when I started to get really going.
Okay.
09, I was doing a bunch of research.
Yeah.
So I kind of, 09 was kind of the first year I really started working on it.
How do you think someone could do, you had the Chinese language, which is super helpful. Do you think someone could have kind of figured out what you figured out without having, with that language barrier, have a translator, or I don't know how, it must have been so helpful to speak the language.
I would say no.
Yeah.
And I'm serious about that. Like no one's ever asked me that question. I think no, I think that, knowing the language, was a huge part of it. Knowing the culture is the second part of it. And then the third part of it is helping them understand how we think. And then also what we needed, Cozy Earth needed. Yeah. So like, that was hugely important. I think that, people have tried to copy us, and they still do. Mm-hmm. They're kind of all over the place, but it's kind of like a painting, like if you paint something, I've used this example before, but if Leonardo da Vinci paints something and then I go in and try to paint it, say I'm the most talented artist alive today, right, and I go try to repaint this, it's just not going to be the same. Right. It's going to look a little different. And same with music. You'll see that all the time. Like some guys say, I'm going to write a song that's just like Blackbird by the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And it sounds nothing. It sounds like Green Day. Mm-hmm. And it's in his mind, that was his inspiration, but it came out of his hand and his mind differently. So there is an art form to this part of the job. It's not just calling, how much does it cost? I want it cheaper. What's the margin? Right. Like what I'm doing and what our company does now as like in totality is we like get into the weeds and we look and find out, we learn about it, and we like say, how can we make this better? Why are you doing it this way? And we ask the questions, and then we challenge them to do something different, and we keep pushing to make it better. And we don't take stuff that's just like the first run. So that's a big one. And then to do that, you have to be able to reach to the actual people who are running these massive factories further in the supply chain. You can't just work with the people who sew it together.
Yeah.
And even if you get there, you're doing okay. But usually you're working with a middleman who's calling those places.
A broker.
As brokering it.
Yeah.
So when he tries to tell the factory, hey, I've got this guy in America that wants to do this new thing, and then he'll tell you what you want to hear. He'll be like, yeah, they're going to do it. No problem.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's made from bamboo. It's really like wood pulp.
Yeah.
It's like they'll do all kinds of things like that because they don't even know. Like they don't know what it's made of. And I've gotten to factories before numerous times where I'm like, hey, where do you get this yarn? They're like, we don't know. Mm-hmm. We buy it from a broker. Mm. So like even the yarn comes from a broker. So you're like, well, let me talk to the broker. Where do you buy it from? And he's like, this place, but they won't meet with you. I'm like, why? They don't meet with foreigners. They just don't deal with end users. I said, well, I speak Mandarin. Like, I'd love to meet him, and I'm going to drive out there and go meet him. And they're like, okay. And then I just show up. And if they don't invite me, I'm still there on the doorstep. And then we talk, and it's like an awesome experience. Yeah. So, and then I asked them, like, where do you get the fiber from? Like these 3 places. I'm like, do you think they'd hang out with me? Like, oh, I'm friends with that guy. Yeah, for sure. Let's go out and see it. So it's much more of a guerrilla style, approach, and it requires the language makes it happen.
Yeah. That's amazing. Are you still going out there like every now and then?
I'll be there in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'll be there in 2 weeks. And it's not just China. So I'll be in Pakistan this year.
Okay.
Italy, Portugal, Spain, Vietnam, Thailand. So like we're kind of all over the place now, and those places I'm utilizing similar things, but I have the leverage of Cozy Earth now that gets me into the door. Mm-hmm. Whereas as a startup and getting going for several years, there's no gravitas behind our brand.
Sure.
So it's different. So I think once you have the gravitas, you can get some more access in these other countries.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it makes perfect sense to build those relationships ground up, being there and flying out and actually feeling, the materials that they're utilizing.
Yeah.
Is so important.
For sure.
Do you have I'm sure you have, are there multiple factories? Is there a sole factory that you use for your product, or is it kind of dispersed?
There's a lot. There's probably over 50 at this stage, on just the, kind of the head point of it.
China or elsewhere?
No, all over.
All over. Yeah.
And then there's probably behind that, there's another, I don't know, 70 or 80, because you've got probably 100, because you have all the supporting cast that has to get it to where it is finished.
Yeah.
And the finishing, like I said, is the stitching and the cutting and the sewing, whether it's clothing, apparel, or, even candles. Like there's a whole thing with that too. So we're doing it with every single product that we have. We're really, deeply integrated in the supply chain.
Yeah. And are these factories also, are they all third party? You're making other stuff outside of Cozy Earth, and they kind of slot your product line in, or do you have control over these factories? Or
no, we don't own any of the factories, but we are the biggest customer for a handful of them.
A lot of them. That's great.
So, and that definitely helps, right? Yeah. You don't own the factory, but you're important.
Yeah. And do you have a warehouse locally you store stuff?
Yeah. So we have 2 shipping and fulfillment facilities, one out of Kentucky and one out of Utah.
Okay.
And then we have another warehouse here in Vineyard as well.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your uncle, Seed Capital.
Yeah.
How did you guys grow from there? I mean, did you require, well, and this will get to another question. I know you guys had an investment from Aries.
Yes.
The last little bit, but tell me a little bit about growing, need for capital, raising capital investors, how you guys or if it was all just organic or. So
much of it is timing, right?
Yeah.
But for us, I think my timing was off in this sense, and I'm glad it was. And what I mean by that is like, there was a golden age of D2C, direct to consumer, from 2000, maybe 14 to 2019, 18, where Facebook ads were cheap. Mm-hmm. And, acquiring customers was doable. And also investors really had a great appetite for consumer businesses, and they were pouring money into D2C companies that weren't profitable. And so I started well before that, right? 09, 10. And so I was like, and I did not even have enough money to run my first ad on until 2016, on Facebook. So for 6 years, I was the only employee. I raised some capital before this whole big advertising on Facebook thing happened. And I had a little bit of seed. I bought pretty much just enough for inventory.
Yeah.
And then not to pay myself.
Yeah.
And then I got the inventory, went to some trade shows, started meeting with people and talking to them and seeing kind of what it was doing on the ground. It was doing good. Sales were slow. I didn't have trying to spin up a website, trying to guerrilla that thing together. Everything was bootstrappy for that first 6 years. Yeah. And then I'd run out of inventory regularly and then have to get more. And I'd have to kind of ask for more capital kind of in dispensary, small amounts. Mm-hmm. And that was helping me kind of keep, the lights on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't making really fast scaling progress.
Yeah.
But I believed in the product and I stuck with it. And so I was like, I know that this reaction that I'm seeing at these shows and with these customers and my friends and family, that it's going to, if it gets going, like it's going to spread like wildfire. So I needed to push the snowball. And as I, got into year probably 5 or 6, we started to really start to take off in terms of and I say really take off. We were running out of inventory incessantly. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I just couldn't keep anything in stock. And it was very small numbers, And then I had a frank talk with that family that was helping me.
Yeah.
And I said, look, we got to do something here. And they're like, well, we have a friend. We'll have him look at your business and see what he thinks. And he thought it was really good and convinced them what I was saying was true. Mm-hmm. And we raised a few $100,000 in friends and family capital.
Yeah.
And then I was able to hire my first couple employees. Shortly after that, we started to really take off and from where we were. And then we got Oprah's Favorite Things for the first time. And then that was a great thing for us not in the moment, like that Christmas went good, but it wasn't insane. Mm-hmm. But after that, we were able to leverage that and really, help, use it as a validation point for our brand in advertising that we could now afford. And so we really started to grow from there. And then the company was, up several 100% kind of thing over a couple years. And then I was able to we had even more inflection ahead of us. And so I saw that happening, and I saw that the group that we had was friends and family, the capital that we'd raised, and I really wanted to return something nice for them. Yeah. So in just a few short years, I was able to do that by capitalizing the business and bringing in Aries as my main partner. Yeah. So Aries has been fantastic, unbelievable people, best investors out here, in my opinion. Yeah. But they're just incredible people, and so they really caught on to what we're doing and believe in what we're doing and let us kind of continue to grow the business.
Yeah. And when was that investment? It was pretty recent.
It was actually 2020. Okay. So it was almost 5 years.
5 years. Yeah. And I mean, curious, just whatever you can share or not share, but the structure of something like that, when a private equity group wants to come in and supply some liquidity, what did that look like high level? Was it equity? Was it debt? Was it a line of credit? How did you potentially benefit from that personally? How did it benefit the business?
Yeah.
How was that structured with Aries, and how did you negotiate that?
Yeah, I would say, without giving too many specifics, I would say it was an equity deal that literally recapped out the friends and family.
Okay.
There was a little opportunity for me, but I didn't want to take it because I still believe in Cozy Earth in a major way. The upside on Cozy Earth is great. So, I was very serious about staying involved.
Yeah.
And still am. We have very singular focus at Cozy Earth, and it's to grow the business, provide the amazing products and grow the business. So that's kind of where I was. I felt like that had ran its course and I just needed to kind of get to the next stage. Mm-hmm. Each one of these deals are different. I met with 60 different private equity firms.
Oh, wow.
you know.
Did you have an investment banker helping you out, or
No.
like a broker or anything? Okay.
Did it all myself over a year and a half.
Wow.
So like I literally I didn't just call them, they were calling on me. And we had relationships kind of going, and we were talking. And, you know, during this time you had like the Caspers, you know, and Allbirds and all these kinds of things. And they were all just like doing really well, but they weren't making any profits. Yeah. And then later they all cratered. They lost like 80% of their value or more. Some of them are gone now and soon to be gone. So, you know, at the time it was like a different environment, but I will say like the people I met with, it was like, you know, there was people trying to flip Cozy Earth, you know, you could kind of sense, and then other people who just didn't get what I was doing. And so it was a super good experience for me to kind of understand how they would all look at the business. And then when it came down to it, we had a few suitors, and I was just like, this is the one I want to pursue. And I was really adamant actually about working with Aries. I thought they were so good. They were doing exactly what I wanted to do. That's
amazing. That's great. And, from a diversification standpoint, I mean, you talk about bedding, but now you're doing apparel, like skincare, clothing. Was that a natural evolution, or was that like did you feel like that was a necessity with the market, or how did that evolve?
Good question. I would say, you know, I would never, if you're going to start a business, I always tell people this, and you have a product-based business like mine, then you would have to say, what is the next 50 products you're going to come out with, and why should they exist? So I really think that's the way you should think about doing anything in consumer products, because, you know, Allbirds taught us this, right? You can sell a shoe with wool on it, and that's interesting for a few years, and then it's not.
Right.
And it's like, what else you got? And you look at the greatest companies in the world in consumer, like Nike, right? Or Coca-Cola, or, you know, there's Lululemon's a good one too.
Yeah.
But you say like, they have so many goodies in their bag of tricks, and they're constantly coming out with new ones. And it's not just a necessity. It's because it's their value. Does that make sense? So like you as a CEO or a founder, you have to have that feeling of like, it cannot just be about making money. There has to be something else that's pushing you to be able to innovate. And if you have one good idea, that's not enough. You need like a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say it's a mixture of, you know, I didn't think like, oh, we need to come up with something, hurry.
Yeah.
It just made a lot of sense for me. I was like, I want to make, you know, our value is we think we have the answer to make life a lot more comfortable in your best times of day. Yeah. And so, and we have the talent and ability to do that in myriad ways. So where does that connect, and how does that fit in our ecosystem, and how far can we take it? And we just go product by product, and we work on them for years, and we say, okay, this one's good. This one's, you know, leading. Let's launch that one first. This was exciting. And we've come up with some really awesome stuff. I'm biased, but we've come up with some really, really awesome stuff that's done real well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, where do you guys see yourself going? I mean, you have the investment from Aries a few years ago. What is the future? What are your goals? Where do you want to take Cozy Earth?
Yeah, Cozy Earth, I want it to become a household name, you know, worldwide. So, and I want it to be known for bringing comfort, sanctuary, you know, recovery, to families across the world. And I feel like the world needs Cozy Earth. I feel like it's, you know, we have, you know, we're so busy. We've got all these things moving around. We've got, crazy politics. We've got all these things that people, you know, argue about and have strife with and have stress on. And there's anxiety and depression and all these kinds of things kind of roaming around the earth. And I feel like we just need to chill. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we need time to like unwind and retreat and like have moments with our loved ones in our favorite place, our home. And I feel like making the home a more comfortable, not just luxurious, because we're doing that, but restorative environment is something that the world needs. And so my goal is to get this out to as many people as I possibly can. And while doing that, I have to live within the constraints of a business of like, you know, getting revenue, top line and bottom line, you know, moving up and to the right. We're doing that, and we're going to keep doing that as a major focus. But the value system, what I have is like, I want more people to feel and experience, and I want to provide more solutions for them. How that kind of works out in terms of like from a business standpoint, like a strategy standpoint, it kind of takes care of itself. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't need to do anything right now. Like we're in such a great position, and I feel like we have so much runway ahead of us that we're a healthy organization. And that's a major, major focus for us, is keeping the business in tip top shape, not just growing, but tip top shape. Yeah. And say, you know, we don't need to do anything, but my experience is that it takes care of itself, and the conversations, and when the timing's right, you know, transactions happen, new things happen. So I don't have like a specific thing that I'm like, hey, you know, this must do this, or I'm sweating that I need to get something done.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, when the timing's right, I'll know, and it'll be time to maybe bring on a new partner, or, you know, make a strategic investment, or, you know, do something with the business that I think that would propel to the next level. But right now there's so much ahead of us. It's going to be exciting.
That's great. And I love that it's more than just selling a product. It's more about creating a sanctuary, adding value. And yeah, I can hear that passion in your voice. That's awesome. Last couple questions. We'll wrap up, Tyler. If you had to do what you've done again today, start Cozy Earth from scratch, or a consumer product good, whatever it is, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to do what you've done today?
Yeah. I would say, you know, go back to problem and solution. You know, like, here's the first thing I would say: don't copy anybody. You know, like, it's not a sustainable business model, and you might fool the customer for a little while, but they're smart. Mm-hmm. They'll figure it out. Secondly, the investors will sniff it out. So you won't have a lot of suitors for any kind of transaction or investment. You need something unique and novel, and it can be in a category that's already been done. Like if you're going to make the best toilet paper in the world, right? There's a lot you can improve with toilet paper. So it's like, you just go in there and start looking at it and see how you can make it better, and then start doing the research around it. But understand that, like I told you, what's the next 50 products coming around it that's going to connect to the value system of how you kind of approached it. Also, I'd say you're going to be more fulfilled as a person if you are working on something that you feel like is making the world a better place. So if you're doing something like that, I think that if the success comes and you've worked your rear end off to make it happen, if it comes, you're gonna feel a lot more fulfilled about what you're doing, because you know, it's anticlimactic, the money part of it. You know, it's like it can be kind of a letdown if your mission isn't grander than just trying to enrich yourself. I think those are three things I would think about. So one, try to create something that's never been done before, but never been done before in this way. Maybe if you come up with something that's never been done before, unbelievable. Also, don't be a copycat. Don't be a poser and try to pretend that you're something that you're not, or try to piggyback onto someone else's thing. You're always going to be the second fiddle. Yeah. You know, so you don't want to be. You want to be first fiddle, and you want people looking at your taillights. And then the next one I would say is have a roadmap, as if you're believe in it, that it's going to be successful, and put the roadmap out. And then lastly, go out and let everybody you possibly can poke holes in your ideas, and make that a regular exercise of bringing ideas out and putting yourself literally out there and trying to get people to criticize you. So that will help you make your plan stronger, because then you can anticipate what people might go against you or say or question, and you confront yourself with questions you might not be willing to ask yourself. Yeah,
I love that advice. It's great. And I think a lot of people do just want to copy because it's been successful somewhere else. But when you talk about what you did, I mean, the years in China, you can't replicate some of that stuff. No. So people see the headlines and they're like, well, I can do that too, right? Because what's the big deal? But that's why I love hearing the founding stories.
Thank you.
Last two things. Faith. How has faith played a role in your life and your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's everything to me. I mean, I feel like I'm here for a purpose. I believe in God and very strongly, and I believe that He's put me here for a purpose, and I really believe it's to serve your fellow man. And so, there's a great scripture in the Bible that says, love God and then love your neighbor. If those two commandments, everything, all the commandments hang on those two principles, right? And so that's really what I'm doing at this stage, in my life. I'm really focused on Him and how I can make Him proud. And He's told me. So for me, I feel like if I just keep loving, the way I show love to Him is I show love to other people. And so I have been so blessed to see the people around me in my business succeed as well alongside me. And I want to bring them with me. And so the people who work at my company are very important to me. The people we're serving who use our products, I love them. I think of them as my family. And then when we talk, and it's fun to commiserate about the products and how it's having a good effect on their life. And I feel like I can help them more. And I feel like that's given me a lot of good purposes and really centered my work around service. So it's an important thing to me and cannot be understated. Driving force for sure.
Yeah. And the last thing I ask most of my guests, this is when you think about how you define success in your life, there's a lot of ways you could think about that. But
yeah.
How do you define that in your life? How do you think about a life well lived?
Yeah, I think that I'm also blessed to be a husband and a father. And so I have 3 young kids. I really am focused on setting a good example for them. I feel like if I can show them not what they're supposed to be, but show them love and care and help them, find their own self-worth and help them find their own self-confidence to do what they want to do in life. I think that, and also to have a belief that in kind of a driving force, like I've talked about, in faith and in serving other people, I feel like that'll be a great accomplishment. We all have to make a living. We all have to pay for our lifestyle and everything like that. And then my feeling is everything else after that is cream cheese, it's just icing on the cake. Once you've got a roof over their head, you got them in a neighborhood that you feel comfortable with, you set them up to succeed with education and friends and good influences. Everything else in life, a great vacation or, some nice things or whatever else like that, it's icing on the cake. It's not as important as developing, good relationships and the family. So I'm really focused on that. I feel like that hopefully will be my legacy as a person. And then hopefully we're bringing other people together. I think a lot about families when I'm making products and how they might enjoy it together. And I'm like, they use our throw on while they're watching a movie, or they're, had a hard day and they're having a, tough, good conversation in their bed, or maybe they're, taking a bath and just closing their eyes and just chilling, with our candle and maybe one of our towels. So I just like those feelings and thinking about family in that regard. And I feel like that's really kind of a nice thread that I can do with what I'm doing for work.
Yeah. Well, no better way to end. Thank you for sharing your story, Tyler. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much, man. Great to meet you.
Absolutely. You as well.
Yeah. Good luck.
You.